Hello, and welcome to our next presentation. On behalf of the MIT CDOIQ Virtual Symposium, we'd like to thank all of our sponsors who have continued to support the symposium during this very challenging year. Before we thank our partners, we'd like to ask that sometime during the symposium's breaks that you visit our partners' virtual booths. You can also visit the Content Hub on the MIT CDOIQ website for some great partner resources. We'd like to thank the following partners: Deloitte, Informatica, Privacy Analytics, DAWX, Fusion Alliance, KPMG, Sandal Consultants, Tamer, Elation, Ali Data, Big ID, Boomi, Caserta, Citizen, Data Kitchen, Garage, Wakira, Pylog, Click, ThoughtSpot, Eckerson, Global IDs, Snowflake, Starburst. And as I said, please make every effort to visit our partners, use the virtual passport, because without them and our partner support, the symposium could not be held. Thank you. Hi everyone, and welcome to session 12B at the MIT CDOIQ Symposium and the virtual symposium. This year we're delighted to have back again Stewart Bond, and Stewart will be talking about data enablement in the data economy. So Stewart, looking forward to your presentation, and over to you.
Thank you, Robert. Let me just share my screen. Can you folks see that all right?
We can indeed. You're good to go.
Okay, great. Thank you. Well, thanks, Robert, for having me again this year. It's an honor and a privilege to be a part of this prestigious conference, as a lot of my other speakers have said as a part of this. So what is data? Who is using it? How is it relevant to the digital economy? And when will we recover from the economic impact of this global pandemic that we're in? And is data a part of that recovery? Well, my name is Stewart Bond. I work for International Data Corporation, or IDC. I'm IDC's analyst that's responsible for researching the data integration and data intelligence software market. My job is to track software vendors in this market to look at what new products and capabilities are emerging and what kinds of business and technical problems they're solving for their customers. I also track how much money they're making, and so that informs how we size the markets and how we forecast the markets. And of course, it gives us the opportunity to write trends reports because we can see where that money is being spent. Now, as a part of the larger IDC team, I contribute a data integration and intelligence perspective and view into our research in what we're calling the digital economy, which is the thing that comes as a part of digital transformation. More recently, I've been able to apply this lens to the research that we've been doing on the impact of COVID-19 on IT markets. So today I'm going to spend some time talking about data as the lifeblood of this digital economy that we're in, and what's driving new business models, better customer experience, better decisioning, and artificially intelligent automation. We'll also take a look at the digital economy and the role data plays as the economy in general is in crisis, as I've added in brackets. There's a new generation of data native worker that's using data, from the front office to the back office, from the assembly line to the executive office. At IDC, we've defined these workers as Generation Data, or Gen D for short. I'll spend a little bit of time talking about who they are, what they do, and best practices backed by survey data and case studies as we get to know them. Now, IDC can't predict when the economy is going to fully recover from this current crisis, but we've been surveying IT decision makers across the globe every 2 weeks. We started in March of this year, so March 19th, 2020 was our first set of responses. The survey data has given us a lot of insights into stages of recovery and whether or not data is a part of that return to growth. So let's take a look at these 5 stages that we've uncovered as we look at the modern data environment that we have in our organizations. Now, I'm sure many of you have seen, these cartoons on social media. Just double check here. Are you folks seeing the bar at the top? Oops, go back. Apologies. There we go. Okay.
Yeah, we're seeing it. We're seeing it.
Okay, I didn't know if you were seeing the Zoom bar at the top, but I guess not. Okay, great. You know, I think we've all seen, like I said, I think we've all seen these on social media. Now, what's happened during the pandemic is that CEOs who may have been on the fence around digital transformation now see why it's vital to their business operations. Also, what is interesting is that companies that had digital transformation plans before the pandemic hit still have those plans. The timing and priorities may have changed. They've either been accelerated or perhaps delayed, but the vision is still in place. Now, late in 2019, IDC predicted that by 2023, over half of the global GDP, that's over half the world's economy, would be driven by digital-first companies, highly confident and skilled in creating digital experiences, offerings, and business operations. You know, COVID-19, this pandemic may have accelerated that, but why is digital transformation so critical? Well, IDC's research also shows that digital-first leaders are driving 8 times the revenue growth and twice the profit margin of digital laggards. Now, it's not only our research that's uncovering this, but if we look at some of the second quarter results that came in out of the economy, we can see how even though the economy's been struggling, you know, online companies leading in digital transformation, many have been posting record results despite this crisis, and in some cases because of the crisis. Now, IDC has developed a 5-stage enterprise recovery model with phases that align with the economic situation we're all now facing. Starting on the left, we can see that when the crisis first hit, organizations focused on business continuity. As the economy slowed down, cost optimization kicked in. And in the recession that we've entered, organizations are focused on business resiliency. Hopefully, as we move into the return to growth, organizations will be making targeted investments in technology and process and transformation to transform and become that future enterprise that's realized as we enter into whatever the next normal is. And you can also see examples here of business initiatives that have been occurring during each one of these stages. The other natural question when looking at this curve is, where are most organizations today? Well, we've been surveying, and as of the most recent wave of survey data, which was collected, came in on July 31st of this year, we can see that 40% of organizations are either in the cost optimization or the business resiliency phase. Now, these are worldwide results, which is why we have almost an equivalent percentage in the return to growth in the next normal, representing perhaps regions that have already started recovering. Or perhaps it's those that believe we're already in the next normal with uncertainty continuing indefinitely. Now, I'll come back to this model in the last section of today's session, but we need to keep this in mind as we discuss the role that data is playing in the digital economy and those that work with data in the midst of this cycle. Digital is data, and data is driving new business models, products, services, and revenue in this digital economy. Here are the results from IDC's 2020 edition of the Global Data Sphere Study. This is a study that we do every year. This year, we estimated that 45 zettabytes of new data was created in 2019. The enterprise was responsible for about 52% of that. How big is a zettabyte? Well, I found a reference online that claims that it's one zettabyte is equivalent to watching online video 24 hours a day for 57 million years. Wow. So as an analyst, I had to go do the calculations myself. And yes, if you assume that 1 hour of streaming video is about 2 gigabytes, it does indeed come out to 57 million years. So multiply that by the 45 that we said was created, and we're going to be watching video for 2.5 billion years just to consume the data that was created last year alone. Now, this year's data sphere estimated an additional increase in the amount of data that's being generated as we go through this pandemic. And this conference itself, what I'm doing right now, it's a prime example of how much additional data, digital content, is being created that otherwise would not have existed if we all would have been together at MIT this week. Now, of all the data that's being created, only 12% of that data is original, meaning 88% of it is copied for distribution and consumption. Perhaps you played this game as a youngster. A group of people sat in a circle, and the person in the circle whispered a story to the person next to them. That person then whispered the story to the next person. And it went around the circle until it got back to the person who started the story in the first place. What happened? The story changed. Well, the same risk occurs with data as every single copy is created. Now, the majority of this data was created on endpoints, not in the core. A small percentage was created at the edge, and this percentage will continue to grow as 5G gets rolled out. In 2019, about 19% of the data was real-time data, and we expect it to make up about 24% by 2024. Now, it's also important to note that this is data created, not stored. We estimate that only about 1% of this data is actually stored, but even 1% is still a big number. It's about a half a zettabyte, or 28 million years instead of binge watching instead of 57. Now, with all this data distribution and scale, it's no wonder that in a 2019 survey that IDC did of data integration and integrity software users, we found that 95% of organizations are integrating up to 6 different types of data. That could be files, relational data, master data, transactional data, spatial data, object data, IoT data, log data, interaction data, social data, and so on. You get the picture. Now, in addition to complexities of data formats and types, organizations are also managing data on up to 10 different data management technologies. Mainframe, yes, it still exists. Relational databases, analytical databases, NoSQL, Hadoop, object stores, streaming, edge, in-memory. The point here is that, yes, data is critical to the digital economy, but the reality of scale, distribution, diversity, and complexity of data and our data environments isn't making it any easier for us to get through this crisis. We really need to enable a new generation of data native workers to overcome these challenges. And some of these challenges are further listed here on this page. Again, back to the study we did last year, 94% of organizations are applying data integration and intelligence capabilities on data in hybrid and multi-cloud environments. What we used to understand is the 80-20 rule, that is 80% of the time is spent looking for and preparing data, and 20% of the time is being spent analyzing the data, is getting closer to the 85-15 rule, because we asked people how much time they spend on all of the different data activities they work on. Only 15% of their time is being spent on analytics. Earlier in 2020, we discovered that 45% of organizations have started using new internal and external data, new data types, and new analytics in the last 6 months, or in this case, about the last half of 2019. As we heard in Professor Lauren Gardner's presentation yesterday, not only Johns Hopkins, but many organizations are dealing with new data sources and data types as they try to track the virus and plan for the future based on the data that's being tracked. So data, the people that work with the data, and those that lead data initiatives are faced with constant change, and we all know that change has happened quickly in the last 6 months. According to the online Merriam-Webster dictionary, data is factual information, such as measurements or statistics, used as a basis for reasoning, discussion, or calculation. It can also be defined as information in digital form that can be transmitted or processed. But data without intelligence, it's just data. At IDC, we actually see metadata and analytics of metadata, something we're calling data intelligence, providing organizations with the knowledge necessary for data enablement to govern and deliver the right data in the right context to the right resource, person or machine, at the best time, and assures being used for the right reason. It answers questions such as, where is the data? What does the data mean? How clean or dirty is the data? Who's accountable for that data? Who's accessing the data and when? Data intelligence is captured using software. I remember I track software vendors using software such as data profiling and stewardship, master data intelligence, data cataloging, business glossaries, and lineage. Now, I just completed an IDC MarketScape, which is a market evaluation looking at data catalog software vendors. And as this conference is focused on best practices, I want to highlight some of the things I heard during reference interviews to highlight the importance of data intelligence. Here we can see some of the situations and problems that these organizations were dealing with. The business couldn't even converse with the technical team because they couldn't understand what the data meant. Some had training in data tools, but they didn't have any training in the data. Some were very large, complex organizations. One organization had 25 different centers of excellence reporting into the chief data officer. One was for visualization, another for architecture, another for integration, another for business analysts, another for data stewardship, and so on. The 80-20 rule, this is one of my favorite quotes. You need to be here at least 5 years before you can be productive. One organization had also done a lot of work to populate the catalog with documentation about the data, but getting people to be part of the collaborative solution to add knowledge back into the catalog has been a real challenge for them. Looking at some of the solutions that they deployed, well, it's interesting. You have to think about cloud or on-premise when you're looking at potentially deploying some of your own solutions. Several data catalog customers started with an on-premise solution, but are now questioning that decision, and as they maybe would have preferred a cloud-based solution. Focus on data as an asset, not a liability. Treating it as a liability focuses too much attention on protection activities, whereas treating it as an asset focuses more attention on how to leverage and monetize that asset. And automation of metadata capture and classification will go a long way towards success. As we've seen in sessions earlier today, automation of capturing that information and working with data is really the only way to do anything these days, and the scale of the data, as I just illustrated in the zettabytes, indicates. And reporting in the catalog is really important for communication and understanding of what's going on. Now, some of the things that made these companies successful: scope. Focus on a critical set of data elements, a key database or a data mart only. Don't try to tackle all of the data warehouse or the data lake or the entire ERP database. You don't want a project with a lot of stakeholders, or decisions, they'll never get made. And pick something that is also business relevant, that once the implementation is done, the results are going to speak for themselves, and they're going to show real business value. The more business value that can be demonstrated in the first implementation, the easier it will be to get more budget and resources to expand the implementation and increase adoption. And have a fail fast option and learn from those failures. I actually saw a tweet this morning from Harvard Business Review. If you're not prepared to fail, you're not prepared to learn. It's also not just about the data. Don't forget the analytics and the reports. There's tremendous value in adding those dashboards and models into the catalog. And the survey work we did to uncover the slipping in the 80-20 rule, We also learned how often workers start to build an analytical asset only to discover it already existed. And then the amount of time that was spent building that new asset before that discovery was made. 70% of users are experiencing that on a daily or weekly basis. And 54% of them were spending anywhere from 1 to 8 hours building that new asset before discovering they didn't need to do that in the first place. So multiply that by the average hourly rate of a data analyst against how many data analysts you have in your organization, against the amount of time they're potentially wasting per year. And the numbers add up really quickly. Now, organizational support, it's critical to get that executive support, but this is not just executive support, this is organizational support. It's not so that executive can stand at the front of the room and take credit for all the work the organization has put into the project, but it's support from the top to the bottom, all the way through all levels of the organization. Because being enabled by data changes how people do their jobs. And as a result, everyone needs to be open to that change. Another success factor, architecture, understanding the breadth of data types and technologies that are in scope for data intelligence is critical, because you're going to need access to those data sources. And that may bring in some data ownership, technology, and CISO implications. And metrics. It's so critical to measure what you're doing. One reference has built a data quality dashboard, tracking the number of terms, definitions, rules, and data quality levels that they're achieving in their data sources. They also do a trust survey, a data trust survey every year to measure their progress. At least 2 of the organizations spoke with are doing customer satisfaction surveys internally and tracking their NPS scores. And of course, communication, communication, communication. Can't be stressed hard enough. Data leadership is really part of making this new generation successful. So let's spend some time getting to know this new generation. IDCs define people in these roles as a generation data, or Gen D for short. They're workers that are data natives. Data is what they work in and with to complete their tasks, whether those are tactical tasks, operational tasks, or strategic. Generation D isn't a chronological generation, but a vocational generation, where career and life activities are infused with data, changing and enhancing experiences, decisioning, and outcomes, not just at work, but also in what they do in their daily lives. We estimate that Gen D makes up about 25% of knowledge workers in the enterprise, and we believe that number continues to grow as data becomes more prevalent in business and critical in business operations. Now, Generation D includes people with data in their titles, the data engineers, the data stewards, the data administrators, the data analysts, but it also includes anyone who makes data-driven decisions, who needs to know the provenance and lineage of data. They have a sense for what data is real and what data is fake. They're able to question the results of automated recommendations, and they're able to communicate using data and contribute back knowledge about that data to their peers. Using the results of the survey earlier this year of 310 business intelligence software users, we can see that analytics are influencing Gen D decision-making from the front office to the back office and at both the manager and executive levels. Now, analytical solutions, as we all know, use data and are ultimately deployed for one reason: to improve decision-making. Better decisions, in turn, influence actions that can lead to several second-order benefits in the business, such as improved revenue and profits, or improved customer satisfaction, employee productivity, customer experience, and so on. Now, while frontline employees might not have to make broad strategic decisions like executives have to, they still often must make daily, frequent, and time-sensitive decisions that need to be data-driven in order to be effective. Now, intelligence about data is really required to help the data native worker with their decisions by increasingly providing the context and it will increasingly provide context machines that will start to make those decisions for us. Now, let's take a look at a few Gen D personas, individual personas, what's expected of them and what they face in reality. Not quite the same as the memes on social media of what people think I do versus what I really do, but along those same lines. And I'll be using survey data and case studies to illustrate the challenges and best practices for these personas. So I'm probably preaching to the choir with this slide, but the chief data or analytics officer, they're expected to create new business value through innovation with data. They're being asked to turn data into revenue, while also trying to optimize data utilization, Gen D productivity, and keep the data secure and compliant in these tough new regulatory environments that we're dealing with. But in reality, we see more data leaders focused on data protection than advocating for or innovating with data. We also see how change, the one thing that is constant, can force a data leader to adapt their leadership style, priorities, and focus. And as usual, all are constrained by budget and resources. What's that one thing that probably is a thorn in most CDAO sides? It's the spreadsheet. These results tell us why spreadsheets are still being used. And even though the most cited reason for using a spreadsheet is analytic flexibility, less than half the time being spent in spreadsheets is on analytics. Respondents also claim that up to 8 hours per week is spent updating spreadsheets every time the underlying data changes, making sure the cell references and the formula references and the external spreadsheet links are all the same and haven't changed. Now, not surprisingly, ease of use and availability also top the list. But surprisingly, the least cited reasons include resistance to change and budget constraints. Now, with the economic downturn and the budget constraint reasoning here may be a little bit more prevalent these days. Now, we all know that use of spreadsheets can break governance models because data once copied into a spreadsheet may no longer be protected. And it can also take on new meaning depending on analytical models and assumptions. Nearly 40% of these survey respondents indicated they use copy and paste to import data into spreadsheets. Let me say that again. Nearly 40% of survey respondents indicated they use copy and paste to import data into spreadsheets. Try tracing the lineage on that. Just over 50% of them use spreadsheet file links. Now, we all know that when you're using a file link, security might not be enforced. And I sure hope you don't move your spreadsheets around on your hard drive and your directory structures, because it's going to break every single spreadsheet that relates to it. Now, the least used method, which also probably enforces the most control, even though it's still not perfect, is JDBC and ODBC connections. So let's take a look at the data architect or engineer. He or she is expected to maintain knowledge about the data assets and how each meets the needs of the business, while trying to promote consistent solution design and use of data to optimize efficiencies, while also containing and reducing the risk as data flows through the organization. But in reality, the architect is faced with inconsistent data utilization, including uncontrolled replication in probably the most popular data analytics tool we just looked at, the spreadsheet. The architect may no longer have control over procurement as well, which can result in black box or opaque solutions that may not be compliant with enterprise principles, causing inconsistencies in utilization. We also know that the engineer and architect is dealing with all these multitude and variances in formats and software and technology for managing data, which this survey data can tell us. We can see that on the left here that these organizations are using, on average, 5 of all 6 types of these software deployments in their data integration and data intelligence solutions. And on average, they're using 8 of the different capabilities out of the chart on the right in this mix of suites and platforms, standalone and custom code for each one of these capabilities that they're working with. No wonder the architect is struggling with their role. Let's take a look at the data steward. They're expected to find and manage data quality issues through to resolution. Data stewards are also expected to help the business understand data to improve their ability to synthesize information, improving the organization's capacity to learn from that data so that insights can be delivered at scale. But in reality, they often have limited authority to enforce those policies. They face a resistance to change, and in general, there's a lack of data literacy. And most likely, they have a lack of insufficient tooling, or they have insufficient tooling, sorry, they lack sufficient tooling. Now I'm going to use a case study from I did with Cummins a couple of years ago to expand on the challenges of data stewardship, because a big part of this project was about meaning and business IT collaboration much more than it was about technology. Like many organizations, Cummins struggled with siloed data vocabularies, which is just a reality in modern business. Siloed systems and technology organizations across regions and business units. Past attempts to consolidate systems and data had largely been IT-only initiatives with a lot of mixed results. My interviewee claimed that IT was set up to fail from the get-go because the business wasn't there to support them. One of the biggest challenges they faced was the "here we go again" attitude and mindset as they got the project off the ground. But Cummins desired a vertically integrated supply chain across all their business units. So something had to be done with the data. The solution involved mastering data from more than 80,000 suppliers among thousands of unique applications within the global Cummins IT environment. Supplier master data was the first data domain to be tackled because they needed to understand the total spend and risk management with any one of their suppliers. Now, it was also in part a proof of concept in demonstrating how the business and IT could collaborate and build a solution together, and trying to differentiate with those past mistakes by starting out with an entirely new approach that put IT completely aside for the first 6 months. Instead, they focused on process, governance, policy, and data. In the end, Cummins was highly successful with the supplier domain, and since they've expanded to additional domains, the initiative helped them establish best practices and an organizational structure for data governance, which includes an executive council made up of C-levels to provide direction and guidance to a strategic council of VP-level data owners that set policy for data. And that policy is taken and implemented by a tactical council made up of subject matter experts and data stewards. There was also an emphasis on measuring their success to prove to the business that efforts were paying off and avoiding those demons of past failures. Now let's take a look at the line of business executive. They're responsible for improving business outcomes, protecting the reputation of the organization, and they need to have access to data and analytics that can be trusted. But in reality, they get different results from seemingly the same source data set, eroding trust in the data and also eroding trust in their staff that are building those analytics. Lack of lineage and poor quality doesn't help in making sure the right data is being used for the right reasons and in the proper context. And IT also gets in the way of data-driven business initiatives. I'm going to use a case study that I did with Cox Automotive to provide insight into the role of data in the life of the business executive, because it was the executives at Cox Automotive that launched an initiative to strategically consolidate areas that made the most sense together, and together delivered the greatest value to help foster innovation. The executives realized from the beginning that data would be a significant part of that effort, in part because what does Cox Automotive do? They deliver data-driven products and services in the automotive industry. They have 40,000 clients worldwide. They have 24 different brands, some you might be familiar with: AutoTrader, DealerTrack, Manheim, Kelley Blue Book, and Dealer.com. Data governance had become associated with no. No, you cannot have access to that data. No, those two data sets cannot be combined or integrated together. No, we can't find that data. And no, I don't even think we have that data. Cox Automotive turned data governance on its head by using the term data enablement, which is all about delivering the right data to the right person at the right time and in the way that they need it for what they're trying to do. This really, when you think about it, is data governance. But because they called it enablement, people saw it as something that this team was trying to help them with, trying to help them use their data. And as a result, they got a lot more buy-in from the data scientists, the data analysts, the product engineers, resulting in innovation and higher data value for Cox Automotive and its clients. This team that used to be called the data governance team were no longer called the no team. They became known as the yes team. And not unlike Cummins, Cox spent more time on defining consistent vocabulary, terminology, definitions, and meaning of data entities before populating a data catalog. Cox Automotive also started with smaller scope initiatives, but ones that delivered real business value for quick wins. They balanced IT and business group involvement to foster a deeper collective understanding of the business needs, the desired outcomes, and IT constraints. And guess what? They improved the business IT collaboration. Now, one of the other things that they said they did to help them be successful is, even though we're part of an academic conference this week, Cox Automotive really balanced the use of those academic frameworks and theory with reality, and that helped them be successful. Now, again, as with Cummins, Cox Automotive established metrics early, and they measured those metrics on a regular basis, and they reported those successes back to their stakeholders. Now, speaking of metrics, these are the qualitative and quantitative measurements that can tell you how data governance and enable initiatives are doing. There's many you can choose from here. You can see from the chart on the right that many organizations are using data quality scores as a way to track how well they're doing in data governance. Security and compliance also are important, but interestingly, even though all say that budget constraints are a top concern, financial ROI is the least measured KPI. Now that we've met Generation D and the data native worker and understand the tools and challenges they face, as data leaders, you and I, need to understand how data will play a role in the return to growth as we move through those 5 stages to recovery into the next normal. Now, as I mentioned earlier, IDC has been surveying the market every 2 weeks, starting in the middle of March of this year. We've been asking IT decision makers to estimate if spending will increase, decrease, or remain about the same across multiple IT domains, including big data, which includes analytics, and other domains such as hardware, networking, software as a service, platform as a service, infrastructure as a service, IoT, 5G, AI, robotics, security, blockchain, services, VR, AR, and edge computing. And there's probably some that I've missed. If it's about IT, we've asked about it. Now, are we in a position of volatility or stabilization? The results you see here, this represents the entire worldwide survey respondent estimation of how they believe spending on big data will change It's either going to increase, remain the same, or decrease. And this illustrates all waves from 1 to 9, with the most recent coming in July 31st. We can see some volatility, especially in some of those earlier waves, but we also see a gradual increase in spending on big data as time goes on. Perhaps that's a point of stability. Now, if COVID-19 really has accelerated digital transformation, and digital transformation needs data, then this chart makes some sense. Now, as a conference of users of technology, not sellers of technology, market spending may not be that interesting to you, but it's also an indicator of where organizations are making investment, which indicates projects occurring. Now, we also see that the most recent wave had the lowest number of respondents that indicated no change. So perhaps we could hypothesize from this that more understand that there will be change one way or the other. Now, if we overlay these spending expectations on top of where organizations believe they currently are in the 5 stages of recovery, we can see a few trends, and this is the results from the July 31st wave. Those that are in the economic slowdown and recession are expectedly spending less on big data initiatives than those in other stages. These dips in spending follows the dip in the economy. But then look at the increased spending on big data for organizations investing in growth, and subsequently for those in what they believe is the next normal. Spending on big data decreases slightly, but is still higher than where those who are dealing with business continuity at the beginning of the curve are spending. This tells me that data, big or little, is playing a role in those organizations that are rebuilding and retooling for the next normal. Now, if we bring the activities back in that are happening at each stage, we can also see the alignment within the use of data as organizations need to innovate to compete in this digital economy. So now that we've seen the state of data in the digital economy, the state of the economy, the challenges we're going through, the people that work with data, let's pull it all together and talk about you, the data leaders, and what's going to be required of data leadership to get to a future of intelligence. Apologies. As an organization in the future of intelligence, it's able to synthesize information, has a capacity to learn, it's able to deliver insights at scale. All of these characteristics are enabled with data intelligence, and require that data leadership. Now, as the digital economy continues to grow in the midst of crisis, Generation D, that data native worker that we met, we've seen they have a diverse set of skills, and as we've discussed, they're distributed throughout the organization. Data leaders will also need to have a diverse set of skills to lead this diverse generation. Now, COVID-19 has taught us a lot, and one of those being how quickly things have and can change. Change is constant, and data leadership needs to be ready to respond and adapt to that change as it happens. Even the way we all work, learn, shop, and play impact data leadership. Spending, as we spoke about and looked at, indicates investment. And investment in data will increase as we return to growth. Data leadership will be expected to leverage data to help plan for that return, to innovate with data and monetize data, and help the organization move into the next normal. Digital business is data, and data leaders will, and already are, becoming business leaders as we move forward through this crisis we're in and into recovery. With that, I would like to thank you for your time and attention. If there's more interest in IDC's 5 stages of recovery research, You can go to idc.com, or you can click on a link that'll take you into the IDC microsite, the COVID-19 microsite, where you can download an ebook that goes into detail on these 5 stages. You can read COVID-19 related press releases, blog posts. You can watch webinars and sessions that have happened to discuss what's going to go on and where we're headed with this. And you can see a list of all the related research that's being published. Now, if you have more interest and or questions about what I walked through today, I'll turn it back to Robert to moderate the question and answer.
Thanks, Stewart. There were some fascinating stats that you were able to actually produce there, so it's incredible. Let me ask the first question that was in the chat box. So, how can an organization most effectively come up with common definitions, etc., when most of our data is about quantitative matters, i.e. justice and or unstructured? Any thoughts?
That's a great question. And I'm actually part of a team at IDC that is, we're not just looking at structure. So granted, I look at a lot of the structured data, but the team that I'm part of, it includes content, includes unstructured data. And metadata is something that has been a key element of unstructured of content for a long time. Every blob that was out there that got put into a content management system had metadata that described what was in that set of binary information. And so it's as critical, it's probably even more critical in the unstructured data world to be able to capture that metadata, to be able to capture that intelligence about that data and leverage that and be able to bring that unstructured data, metadata content, that data intelligence together with the structured data intelligence. That's a whole new frontier that I think we're just starting to enter and to really understand what we can do there, what the opportunities for success are there.
And just an FYI, we did have someone post, will the presentation be shared? We're still trying to work out the best way to get the proceedings documented, but we do know that this session is being recorded and will be posted onto the registration of the panel that you can go to at the front of the session and then replay it back at your leisure and replay it again and again. Another question that came up was it's related to something you mentioned earlier on about the data as an asset. And the question is, has the finance department started to recognize data as an asset and put a dollar value on it?
This question actually came up earlier today in another session that I was a part of. There's a lot of different, there's been a lot of attempts to try to value data. And I think you can, it's easier to understand how much bad data costs, because things happen because you have bad data. But it's more difficult to understand how much good data is worth, or the value of that good data. And it's funny because my sister-in-law is a CFO of a fairly large organization, and we have conversations about data a lot. And it's interesting that in her organization, she doesn't have a CDO yet, but she's looking to have a CDO, but that CDO would report to her. So clearly there is a recognition in her organization that data has value to it. So I don't know if it's showing up on balance sheets yet with a dollar figure. I don't know if as an industry we've completely figured that out. I know there's been a number of books published about it. I think Doug Laney has a book about it, but I don't know if we're there yet. I know we don't have any research that says that we're there yet.
Maybe as IDC, it might be a topic that you might want to help bring the surface there, because I know actually Doug Laney is actually co-presenting on a different channel, a different track, but you had almost as many viewers in your session as Doug did in his. So that's a little trivia fact for you on that. Last question. This was a question I noted. If 1% of the 45 zettabytes of information is being stored, what's happening to the rest? Like, where does it go?
That's a good question. You also might ask, is there any value in the rest of the data that just dissipates? It can probably go a lot of different places. If you think about a lot of the IoT data that's being generated, you think about all these log files that are being created. You know, those log files aren't being stored indefinitely. There's usually a cycle. There's a period where they'll get to a certain level of storage, and then you know, what's old will get replaced with newer and newer data. So that's one part of it. You can also think about there's video that's being captured in cameras. You know, we heard the MLB discussion yesterday about new cameras they put in the ballpark that is capturing players' skeletal movements. I'd be interested in knowing, I'm sure at some point that data is stored, but I don't know if that data is kept, you know, for infinity, right? So there's a lot of data that is created and is streamed, and some data, you know, in reality, after that event has happened, it's no longer valuable to anyone anyways. Right. Something's got to look at that data as it's happening, as it's flowing, and do something with it at that point in time. And after that, there's no need for it. So it can either be stored or it can just disappear into the ether.
Well, which comes back to the point that data may have a depreciating asset depending upon time and it decays. So, you know, and I know that those are topics that are being discussed, and what is the retirement life cycle for data and things like that. All topics for perhaps another session in the future, Stewart.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah. So on behalf of the symposium, those were all the questions that were outstanding. So on behalf of the MIT CDOIQ Symposium, we'd like to thank you for coming back again. I think research like yours is definitely valuable. You know, try and see if we can have you back in the future. You know, we obviously include different people, different faces and things like that, but recognizing that having a pulse on what's happening in the future and having research like yours is definitely something that should be part and parcel of the CDO community, especially as you talk to, you know, the data effectiveness, data literacy, or data education program for your Gen Ds. I love that the term. I've mentioned that before. We're all Gen Ds, so appreciate that. Stewart, many thanks indeed. I'll leave you with any kind of parting words.
Well, just thank you for the opportunity to be a part of this again, Robert, and I'm looking forward to hopefully coming back next year. If not me, we certainly have other people at IDC that have content and research related to what's going on here. You know, again, just thank you. And as I mentioned, there's a lot of things changing right now. We don't know where we're headed, but it's great to see that data certainly looks like it's going to play a big part of that. And I think we're in really exciting times.
Isn't that what everyone says? This is the most exciting time of our lives, right? So may you live in interesting times. Stewart, stay safe, stay healthy, and hopefully we'll see you again next year.
Thank you very much, Robert.